Lila stood by the window, staring at the golden leaves that danced in the autumn breeze, her thoughts a whirl of memories and longing, the sunlight spilling across the living room floor making her feel both warmth and an ache she could not name. The quiet of the house interrupted only by the soft ticking of the old wall clock, each tick echoing like a reminder that life moved fast, that moments she yearned for could vanish in an instant, and she pressed her hand against the glass, imagining Ethan's smile, the way it lingered in her mind even now, years after they had first met at the small cafe downtown where the smell of coffee and baked bread had mingled with the nervous excitement of a connection that had felt immediate, as if their souls recognized each other before their eyes had. And she could still recall the timbre of his voice, gentle and steady, the small laugh that had made her chest tighten, the way he had listened so intently, as if every word she said mattered in a way no one else had ever shown. And now, in the quiet of her own home, with the late afternoon sun casting shadows across the walls, that same longing surged like a tide she could neither resist nor control, pulling her thoughts to a place of forbidden warmth, to memories of moments brushed with tenderness and unspoken possibilities, and yet the reality of her life pressed down on her like a heavy weight. Her son Aiden's voice echoing from the hallway as he called out in his cheerful, carefree way, unaware of the storm of feelings swirling inside her, reminding her that responsibilities could not be paused even when the heart demanded it, and she turned quickly, her pulse picking up as she guided him gently into the kitchen, whispering, "Quick, son, help me before your father gets home." The words light yet heavy with unspoken meaning, a delicate dance between keeping appearances and acknowledging the secret flutter in her chest. And as Aiden helped her carry the small basket of groceries, chattering about his day at school and the stories he had shared with friends, Lila's mind drifted back to Ethan, to the conversations that had lingered long after the cafe closed, to the walks in the park under the warm glow of the setting sun, the way his hand had brushed hers in passing, a touch that had sparked a fire she hadn't dared admit to herself until now, and the memory made her fingers tremble slightly as she arranged vegetables in the basket, aware that every sound of the door, every footstep, could disrupt the fragile bubble she had built around herself, and the thrill of secrecy, the intensity of feeling something that was hers alone yet shared across invisible distance with Ethan, made her heart race and her thoughts scatter in a way that was almost dizzying. The mundane task of unpacking groceries transformed into an emotional labyrinth where desire, guilt, longing and hope intertwined, a delicate balance she had never learned to navigate so carefully. And as she reached for the basket, her eyes caught a glimpse of the envelope she had hidden beneath the counter, the letter from Ethan folded with care, words written with affection and understanding, each sentence a reminder that she was not alone in this strange, tender turmoil, that someone understood the way her heart ached for connection beyond the ordinary, and her fingers hovered over it for a moment before carefully tucking it back out of sight, the act itself a small rebellion, a private thrill, a secret shared with no one but the memory of him. And as she moved to set the table for dinner, she noticed the sunlight shifting, the golden rays now softer, almost fading, as if the day itself were conspiring to remind her that moments of beauty and intimacy were fleeting, that the afternoon was passing and soon the household would fill with the familiar sounds of her husband's return, Mark, whose presence demanded attention and adherence to routine, whose love was steady and reliable but lacked the electric pull of possibility she felt with Ethan, and this contrast made her heart ache with a quiet intensity, the kind that made the chest tighten and the stomach flutter. Emotion she had learned to suppress yet now surged, unstoppable, reminding her that she was alive and capable of longing even when life dictated restraint, and Aiden's laughter, light and innocent, brought her back to the present, a reminder of her role as mother, as protector, as someone who must balance her desires with the needs of those she loved, and she knelt down beside him, ruffling his hair gently, feeling the warmth of his small hand slip into hers for a fleeting second, a grounding moment, yet her mind could not help but wander back to Ethan, to the way his eyes had held hers in that quiet moment at the park, the way he had listened without judgment, the subtle brush of his hand against hers, and even though she knew the boundaries, even though she understood the lines that could not be crossed, she felt a thrill at the thought that there existed a connection that transcended the everyday, a thread that wove between them, delicate and electric, fragile yet undeniable. And as she moved to light the candles for dinner, the flickering flames reflected in her eyes, mirroring the mixture of warmth and longing within her, the soft shadows dancing on the walls like the ghosts of possibilities that hovered just beyond reach, and she wondered if anyone else could feel such intensity without action, such closeness without touch, such love without possession, and she realized that sometimes the heart's truth had little to do with circumstance, that emotions could be rich and vivid even if unspoken, unseen, and she cherished that thought even as a shiver of guilt ran through her. The awareness that Mark's love and dedication deserved her attention, her loyalty, her presence, yet the pull toward Ethan was a quiet, persistent echo in her soul, reminding her that human hearts were not meant to be simple or constrained, that longing itself was a kind of poetry, even if it existed only in fleeting glances and secret letters. And as the front door opened and the familiar footsteps approached, Lila felt the tension rise, the delicate dance between exposure and concealment, the thrill of secrecy heightened by the mundane realities of home life, and she called out with a calm smile, "Aiden, set the table quickly, your father is just about home." The words ordinary, yet her heart raced with a cocktail of fear, excitement and anticipation, and as the clock ticked toward the moment of reunion, she took a deep breath, savoring the small stolen seconds before the ordinary world intruded, cherishing the secret that only she and Ethan shared, a tender thread woven into the fabric of her day, promising warmth, connection, and longing that could be revisited in stolen moments, whispered words and letters tucked safely away. And in that pause, between the rhythm of home life and the pull of the heart, Lila understood something profound, that even in ordinary days, love in its quiet, complicated, and unspoken forms could make the world shimmer, make time pause, and make her feel, in every breath and heartbeat, that life, even in restraint, was achingly beautiful. Evening settled over the house with a soft glow, painting the walls in hues of pink and amber, and Lila moved quietly through the rooms, her thoughts swirling like the shadows cast by the fading sun, the calm of the moment both soothing and unsettling, because the quiet allowed her mind to drift, as it always did, toward Ethan, whose memory lingered like a warm fragrance she could not escape, a presence felt even in absence, and she found herself replaying every detail of their last conversation, the gentle way he had smiled, the patience in his voice, the unspoken promise that they somehow understood each other in ways no one else could, and the intensity of that understanding made her chest tighten with longing, a mixture of fear and desire that pulsed like a quiet heartbeat beneath her skin, and she moved to the kitchen, setting down the small basket of ingredients she had bought, arranging them carefully, her fingers brushing over the labels, and in the mundane act she felt a strange thrill, as if each careful placement of an item on the counter mirrored the careful balancing of her heart, the way she tried to hold on to love and desire while navigating the ordinary responsibilities of home, of family, of motherhood, because Aiden's presence was a constant reminder that life was not hers alone to command, and she glanced toward the clock, noting how the hours seemed to move in strange rhythms, faster when she thought of Ethan, slower when her mind wrestled with guilt or fear, and she remembered the park where they had last met, the way the sun had reflected off the water, sparkling like fragments of hope, how their conversation had flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter, the way he had reached out to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, a gesture that made her heart leap, and she felt the same warmth now, as if that moment were alive again inside her, a quiet fire she could feel flickering in her chest, even as the reality of her home life pressed in, even as Mark's predictable return loomed in the background, a steady presence that demanded attention, loyalty, love, and yet lacked the thrilling unpredictability that Ethan brought into her heart, and the tension between stability and desire made her stomach twist in a familiar, bittersweet way, a cocktail of emotions she could neither fully embrace nor escape, and she moved to light a candle for the evening, the small flame flickering as if mirroring the pulse of her thoughts, the way longing could exist quietly, persistently, in the spaces between responsibilities and routines, between silence and laughter, between ordinary moments and the extraordinary intensity of connection, and as Aiden ran around, finishing his homework, laughing at the smallest jokes, sharing little stories from school, she felt a mixture of joy and bittersweet ache, the joy of watching her son grow, the ache of knowing that some parts of herself had to remain hidden, cherished privately, and the doorbell rang suddenly, making her startle, and her heart skipped a beat at the thought of someone arriving, yet it was only the neighbor bringing over a basket of fresh apples, but even this mundane interaction reminded her of how delicate life was, how quickly ordinary moments could shift, how easily secrets and emotions could collide with reality, and she smiled politely, accepting the gift, tucking the apples into the bowl, thinking of the fleeting nature of sweetness, of love, of warmth, and how sometimes the most profound feelings were the quietest, the ones that lived inside her alone until shared, until acted upon, and she found herself writing a quick note in her journal, a place where she could capture her thoughts about Ethan, about the flutter of her heart, about the way longing could feel like a living thing inside her chest, shaping the rhythm of her day, influencing her decisions, guiding her gaze toward the window where the sky was painted in deepening shades of violet, where the first stars began to peek through, delicate and distant, much like the moments she wished to steal with him, moments suspended in time, moments that existed outside of rules and expectations, and she thought of the way Ethan had asked her questions, the way he had listened without judgment, how every word he spoke carried care and attention, how his presence had been both comforting and thrilling, a paradox she could not untangle, a feeling she could not name, and she wondered if anyone else could understand the depth of quiet connection, the way hearts could speak without words, how longing itself could be a language, how attraction could exist in glances and gestures rather than declarations and acts, and the room seemed to breathe with her thoughts, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards, the rustle of leaves outside, all mingling with the storm of feelings within her, reminding her that life was alive, vibrant, full of possibility even in constraint, and she moved to make tea, her hands shaking slightly with excitement and tension, the steam rising like invisible fingers curling toward the ceiling, the aroma grounding her even as her mind wandered to Ethan, to the warmth of his hand, to the light in his eyes, to the quiet understanding that had wrapped around her heart the first time they truly spoke, and she poured the tea carefully into 2 cups, imagining him sitting across from her, sharing stories and laughter, sharing silences that spoke more than words ever could, feeling the intensity of connection that had lingered far beyond that afternoon, that lingered now in the quiet corners of her mind, shaping the way she breathed, the way she smiled, the way she existed, and she realized that the longing was not just about desire, it was about recognition, the rare and precious feeling that someone truly saw her, knew her, understood the parts of herself that were both fragile and brave, and she sipped the tea, letting warmth spread through her chest, and as she did, she felt both exhilarated and terrified by the thought that these feelings were real, that they existed in the space between her ordinary life and the extraordinary possibilities that Ethan represented, and she heard Aiden's voice again, calling from upstairs, asking a question about homework, and she responded with patience and love, aware that this part of her life was as precious as the other, that the balance she walked was delicate, that every choice mattered, and yet the heart was a stubborn thing, resistant to rules and boundaries, and she felt the familiar stirrings, the quiet, persistent echo of hope, of longing, of connection, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself imagine the riverside park again, letting herself feel the brush of his hand, the warmth of his smile, the soft laughter they shared, and in that imagined moment, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel fully, to live fully even in the constraints of reality, knowing that even a stolen moment of connection could sustain her, could remind her of beauty, could remind her that the heart, though often complicated, though often burdened with duty, was capable of infinite depth, capable of tenderness, capable of yearning and joy and quiet, sustained love, and the moon began to rise outside the window, silver and luminous, and Lila felt a shiver of anticipation, of possibility, of everything that was to come, the evening stretching before her like a canvas, painted with emotions too vivid to ignore, and she whispered softly, a prayer, a hope, a declaration into the quiet of the night. Ethan, I hope we meet again soon. Her words carried not just longing but courage, not just desire but a recognition of the beauty of connection even in moments of restraint, and as the clock ticked toward dinner and the ordinary rhythm of life, she allowed herself one more imagined smile from him, one more imagined touch, one more imagined laugh shared, and she felt alive, fully alive, caught between the mundane and the extraordinary, between the ordinary responsibilities and the rare, shining moments of the heart, knowing that tonight, tomorrow, and all the days to come would carry this quiet, fierce, tender longing, a reminder that love in all its forms was worth feeling, worth dreaming of, worth quietly, fiercely holding in the secret corners of her soul even as life moved relentlessly forward. The weekend arrived with a soft, golden light that filtered through the trees, and Lila felt a mixture of anticipation and nervous excitement as she prepared to meet Ethan at the riverside park, a place that had become a private sanctuary in her heart, a quiet corner of the world where memories of laughter, gentle conversation, and unspoken understanding lingered, and she walked along the familiar path, the crisp leaves crunching under her feet, each step echoing with the thrill of the secret she carried, the delicate balance of longing and restraint that had woven itself into her days and nights, and, as she approached the park, she saw him waiting by the water, his posture relaxed but alert, the sunlight catching his hair, his eyes scanning the surroundings until they met hers, and the world seemed to pause, as if holding its breath, acknowledging the invisible thread that connected them across time and distance, and Lila felt her heart tighten with a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, joy, and the aching intensity of desire that had been building in the quiet spaces of her life, a longing she could no longer ignore, and she walked toward him, her steps light, almost hesitant, yet purposeful, each movement a reflection of the courage it took to meet someone who had come to mean so much, yet existed outside the ordinary framework of her life, and Ethan smiled as she drew near, a smile that held warmth, understanding, and the kind of gentle excitement that made her stomach flutter and her pulse quicken, and they exchanged greetings, casual at first, but beneath the surface lay the depth of unspoken feelings, a history of connection and yearning that could not be captured in ordinary words, and they walked together along the riverbank, the water glimmering in the afternoon sun, carrying reflections of the clouds and sky, each ripple a reminder of the fragile beauty of the moment, the way life moved constantly forward even as they tried to hold on to it, to savor it, to make it last, and their conversation flowed naturally, laughter mingling with thoughtful silence, the air between them charged with emotions that had been simmering for weeks, months, perhaps years, and Lila felt both nervous and exhilarated, her chest tightening as she realized how deeply she had come to care, how much she had allowed herself to hope, to dream, to imagine a life that existed for brief moments beyond the constraints of routine, responsibilities, and expectation, and Ethan spoke gently, asking questions that revealed his attentiveness, his curiosity, his desire to truly know her, and with each answer she gave, she felt herself opening, revealing fragments of her heart that had been carefully hidden, yet welcomed in his presence, and she realized that part of the thrill was the freedom to be seen without fear of judgment, without pretense, without the need to explain every emotion or thought, and the river flowed beside them, carrying the soft murmur of water over rocks, blending with the rustle of the wind through the trees, as if nature itself were conspiring to hold this perfect moment, this fragile connection, safe and sacred, and Lila remembered the first time they had touched, so innocent and fleeting, a brush of fingers that had sparked a fire she could not name, a sensation that lingered in her mind and heart, a promise of what could exist if they allowed themselves to feel, to embrace the fleeting joy of being together even if only for a short while, and she felt the weight of the world lift slightly from her shoulders, replaced with the light, intoxicating thrill of anticipation, hope, and connection, and as they paused near a wooden bench overlooking the water, Ethan turned to her, eyes shining with emotion, and Lila felt herself drawn into the warmth of his gaze, a quiet intensity that made her chest ache with the bittersweet joy of knowing how much she cared, yet how carefully she had to guard the moments, the feelings, the heartbeats shared in secret, and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the touch gentle, tender, electrifying in its simplicity, a gesture that carried all the weight of longing, care, and unspoken understanding, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel fully, letting the warmth of his hand and the intensity of the connection fill her entirely, even as reality whispered in the back of her mind that life demanded restraint, that responsibilities could not be ignored, that love and desire often existed in the quiet spaces between what was and what could never fully be, and yet the beauty of the moment, the magic of shared presence, made her heart soar with hope, with longing, with the exquisite ache of emotions that could not easily be contained, and they walked a little further, side by side, speaking softly, laughing occasionally, sharing memories, dreams, and thoughts that had been waiting for years to be spoken aloud, and Lila marveled at the way their connection seemed effortless yet profound, how every glance, every gesture, every smile carried weight, history, and promise, a language of emotion that transcended words, and the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the water, painting the park in shades of gold and violet, and the air carried the scent of fallen leaves, earth, and the faint trace of flowers, grounding her even as her mind swirled with feelings she had no right to indulge, yet could not resist, and they found a quiet spot near a small bridge, where the water shimmered like liquid silver, and Ethan spoke softly about his dreams, about the life he imagined, about the small joys he cherished, and Lila listened, enraptured, feeling a connection that was rare, precious, and fragile, a thread linking their hearts in a way that made everything else fade into the background, and she shared some of her own hopes, carefully choosing her words, revealing just enough to be real, but preserving the fragile safety of the moment. And as she spoke, Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers, his presence steady, comforting and thrilling all at once, and the bridge beneath them seemed to hold the weight of the world, a sanctuary suspended in time where emotions could be felt fully, freely, yet without recklessness. And Lila realized that these stolen moments, these fleeting hours, were more than just meetings. They were lifelines, reminders that the heart could still dream, hope, and feel even in the midst of ordinary life responsibilities, and the boundaries imposed by circumstance. And as the sky deepened into twilight, with stars beginning to twinkle faintly above, she felt a shiver of exhilaration and tenderness, a mixture of fear and courage as they lingered, talking about small things, sharing glances, letting their hands brush lightly in passing, a touch that spoke louder than words. And she knew that the memory of this afternoon, of this connection, would stay with her long after they parted, shaping her thoughts, her dreams, her very way of feeling. And Ethan finally spoke her name softly, a whisper carried by the wind, and Lila felt her heart respond, a quiet, insistent echo of longing and belonging. And though they had to part eventually, each step back toward reality felt lighter because of the shared intimacy, the quiet, unspoken promises, the sense that even in the ordinary rhythm of life, love could exist, tender and profound, in the moments we choose to see, to feel, to embrace. And as she walked home along the same path, leaves crunching beneath her feet, the river flowing beside her, the sky painted in violet and silver, Lila felt a strange peace settle over her, a mixture of hope, longing, courage, and the bittersweet ache of desire, knowing that life would continue, responsibilities would demand attention, and yet the heart, stubborn and fierce, would carry these moments forward, treasured in memory, alive in imagination, and waiting for the next stolen encounter, the next quiet touch, the next soft glance, a reminder that even fleeting moments of connection could illuminate the soul, that longing could be beautiful, that love could exist in subtle ways, and that the delicate tension between duty and desire was not something to fear but something to honor, something to feel fully, something that made life shimmer with possibility. And she whispered once more into the twilight, "Until we meet again, Ethan," and let the words dissolve into the gentle evening, carrying her hope, her longing, and the tender, vibrant pulse of a heart fully awake to the beauty of connection, even in the quiet, fleeting hours suspended in time, forever alive in memory and feeling.